looked into the black water, and you literally have to step off and go into that. My heart was beating. I didn't want to go. I saw Kate go, so I thought I'd better go because she's my wife. And followed about 10 people into the water with Rick, the dive master, Rico, the dive master, leading us down, 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 down to the coral. I had the torch. Within each buddy couple, one of you had the torch. I said, I want the torch. And I was looking everywhere, shining it into the dark to see for these great whites. And if anything touched my fin, my leg, the torch would be like this. And I have never been so scared in my whole life. As we went further down, I saw the beauty of the coral and the fish, which changes at night, and you see it as more beautiful. So I started to focus on that. Then I thought I saw a shark, so I shone my torch in that direction, and then started going around this beautiful bit of coral, Rick pointing out certain things. And then, after a while, I noticed Rick pointing at the coral, like this. So I looked, we all looked, and looked at each other. And then, after a minute, I noticed Rick was still doing this. And I thought, what's Rick doing? We'd been warned about this particular fish, this shell that you pick up, and this was quite new out there. It poisons you and paralyses you, and you drown. And I thought, he obviously doesn't know he's touched one of those things, and he's dying or he's dead, poor old Rick. How on earth are we going to get back to the boat? Because it is really hard finding the dive boat, especially at night. So my oxygen was going down and down and down and down. I was looking at other people doing this. Eventually he started moving. He was just really enjoying looking at this bit of coral. And then Rick led us after another 15-20 minutes, and we got back to the dive boat. And as we got back on the platform, I was always quick to check my legs that they were both there. And not until they were right out of the water did I feel safe again. Now, let me ask you a question. Did I show faith or doubt in Rick, the dive master, and the whole experience? Both. And sometimes I had a lot of faith in Rick, especially when I was enjoying it. He seemed to know what he was doing. But then with the flip, especially when I thought he was dead, I thought he doesn't know what he's doing. My doubts rose to the surface. And then I started trusting. And then I thought, will he know where the boat is? I wondered if he would find his way back to the boat. And then I saw the lights of the boat, and oh yeah, maybe he does. Faith, doubt going hand in hand. We see this faith and doubt thing going hand in hand in the story of Thomas, the one who unfortunately we know as Doubting Thomas. And that's partly or mainly because of the story we see this morning. For some reason, on Easter Sunday, when Jesus rose from the dead, he appeared to the disciples who were showing a mixture of faith and fear, faith and doubt, because they were behind locked doors, hiding away in fear. But Jesus appears. For some reason, we know why Judas wasn't there, but Thomas wasn't there either. When they then tell Thomas about Jesus' resurrection, he says, well, I'm not going to believe this until I see and touch those nail marks in his hands and where he was pierced in the side. He doubted. Jesus obviously heard, although he wasn't physically present. And then a week later we hear the story where Jesus appears to Thomas and shows Thomas his hands and his side. We don't know whether Thomas touched them or not. Maybe seeing Jesus there before him and seeing them was enough. Why did you doubt? Why did he doubt? It's because faith and doubt go together. We don't know much about Thomas from the other Gospels, from what are known as the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark and Luke. We know from them that he was one of the disciples. But in John we get more of a picture of Thomas. And in John 11 we hear the story when Jesus gets word when he's way outside from Jerusalem that Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, is ill and then has died. Jesus declares his intention to go with them to Bethany, which is near Jerusalem. And the others know in this climate of fear and accusation and threat to Jesus that they are going to be in danger as well. And they say, we can't go back because they tried to stone you last time. But it's Thomas, with a mixture of faith and doubt, says, let's go with him and die together. So tremendous faith, but also a kind of like a darker side to that as well. We can die together. So obviously he'd seen and heard about the rising of Lazarus. Then we hear as Jesus is preparing to go back to the right hand of the Father. So before the crucifixion, Jesus says that I am going to go. He's talking about the ascension after the resurrection when he returns to the right hand of the Father. And he says, reassuringly, because of the doubts, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And then I'm going to come back and take you there. In this heavenly realm, this promise for eternity. And it's Thomas who asks the question after stating, well, how do we find that place? How do we know the way there? And Jesus gives these beautiful words which we can all hear and cherish today. I am the way. So it's not signposts, turn left at Jupiter and keep heading that way for a few thousand miles. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Throughout Thomas's walk of faith, he was showing both doubts, questioning, but tremendous faith. We also hear about Thomas in the book of Acts. Before Pentecost, when the disciples gather together daily in prayer, they don't give up meeting, they gather daily in prayer, waiting for the promise of the Holy Spirit. And I imagine Thomas during that time wasn't just pure faith, but a mixture of faith and doubt, because faith and doubt coexist, they go together. I'm hoping that this morning in naming this, we put to death this idea that doubts are a bad thing. Because when we feel doubts, often we feel guilt and shame, and they go underground. If you're sitting here today thinking, Mike is only talking about doubt because I've told him about my doubts recently, don't worry, it wasn't just you. Quite a few of you have expressed doubts over the last few weeks, and my guess is for every single one of us, if I'm honest, we struggle with doubts from time to time. What is the opposite of faith? Is it doubt? Is doubt actually the opposite of faith? I would suggest not at all. I would suggest that the opposite of faith is certainty. Sounds odd, bear with me. If God wanted to make everything very certain for us, he could have. God could always be physically present with us. He could always answer our prayers in a very obvious way and never physically leave our side. We could get everything we want in exactly the same way we wanted, and there would be no question about it. The only trouble with that, it wouldn't require any faith at all. You'd be stupid not to recognise God and follow God. And there would be no opportunity for our faith, our trust in God to grow. And God in his wisdom didn't want us to be robots like this, making it so obvious all the time that in fact we have no choice. No, he wanted us to learn the walk of faith, to learn that steady growing trust in the midst of doubt. But people like certainty, and some people sound very certain about what they believe in life. I don't know if you have a friend or a family member, or maybe this is you, when you're in the car going on a journey with them and you don't really know where you're going, you get a little bit lost, and then they say, actually it's just on the right. I'm certain, I'm 100% it's on the right. And you think, I'm not sure it's on the right. But they are adamant, it is definitely on the right. So you take that right turning and you go along that road and it dawns on both of you that they got it wrong. But they sounded very certain. My consultant 5 years ago was very, very certain. Very certain. The dog had pulled the lead and broken that finger there, snapped it and twisted it. and it had started to set again, but very wonky and very twisted. And I went to the consultant who had the x-rays, and I said, can you look at it? I think it's twisted. He said, I don't need to look at your finger. Your finger is fine. I had looked at the x-ray. I said, well, can't you know, I don't need to look at your finger. It is fine. It'll heal perfectly. He was very certain. He was very wrong. It is still twisted and set in the wrong place. Many Christians appear very, very certain. You've probably met them. Maybe you are one, or you have been from time to time. And they are very definite about what they believe. They are very definite about what the Bible says. They are very definite about so much in life. They are certain. There appears to be no room for doubt in their lives, and perhaps that is because that is how they've been brought up. And if you express doubts, then with good motivation, they're very quick to come alongside you and quote verses about Jehovah Jireh, the provider, how God is always with you, God has got these plans for you, and so on. Pray, pray, pray. Pray the doubt away. Just have to believe. And they mean it. But very often they're actually missing the point of where you're at. And sometimes I think it's because they feel very uncomfortable themselves with doubt. There's this defense mechanism that I mentioned a while back called reaction formation. And that is a psychological defense. When we feel something we are uncomfortable with, we end up projecting the opposite. So when we're sad, we pretend we're happy. When we have doubt, we pretend that we have faith that is certain. And we're unconscious actually we're doing this. Therefore, when people come alongside who have doubts, express doubts, it actually scares us deep inside and starts to rock our certainty. So we become even more certain. And that's why I think you'll come across many Christians who get very angry when you question their certainty, or when your life questions their certainty, because deep down it produces a lot of fear and anxiety. But doubts are good. As Rob Bell says, doubts and faith go together. They're like a dance partner. Without one, you can't blossom and grow in faith. It's a little bit like, I don't know how many of you had the flu jab this year. We have an inoculation. We have a little bit of a disease to stop us getting the full-blown version of the disease. When doubts come into our life, when we acknowledge them, when we wrestle with them, when we stick with them, they then inoculate us. They help us get used to doubts. So when those big doubts come into our lives, we can cope with them better. There are so many good things about doubts. Did you know that? One of the good things about doubts, as we try to follow, as we try to walk with Jesus, is that it raises questions in our minds. That is good, that is healthy. Not always trendy in churches, but it is good and it is healthy. Look at Thomas. I'm going to prepare a room for you. Oh, hang on. We don't know the way. He raised a question. He could have been shut down by the other disciples. Woo, don't ask, just say yes. Prove your certainty, prove your faith. But actually, it was through his questioning that his understanding grew and his faith continued to grow. I'm not going to believe this Jesus thing until I see the hand and the side. No, don't say that, Thomas. We're not allowed to doubt. You're showing a lack of faith. It's a sin. Jesus heard. He wasn't physically present. A bit like for us, Jesus hears and knows about our doubts. He understands and he meets us in the midst of them. And we can grow, learning to grow. It's painful. It's difficult. It's messy. Thing is, in this life, there is so much changing out there that we sometimes are tempted to cling on to what we know about our faith. We don't want that to change. And when it starts to look like it might, or doubts arise, we cling on more because it's scary. We brought our children up perhaps to go to church and told them about it. Therefore, when doubts arise in our hearts, it's even more scary. And this one thing in life that promises to be unchanging starts to crumble. No wonder it is so scary. And we can try and push the doubts away. But it is in the midst of that questioning, that doubting, however painful it is, that we can grow in trust of Christ. A while back I mentioned different stages of faith. And the first stage of faith is when people come to faith and they have certainty. It's all very black and white. And some people stay there forever. It's very attractive. But then some start to realise that there's more than one way, and then in the second stage of faith they look for what promises to give them success as a Christian. And some people stay, and some churches stay in that place, and that's fine. But then sometimes questions arise because that way of being and doing and following don't seem to work, and the pain doesn't go away, and the questions arise even more, and we move to this next stage of faith if we allow ourselves to. That stage of faith where there's more mystery, more unknowns, more paradox, more wrestling can be the most fruitful part of your walk, I believe. Even though it is so painful at times. I mentioned that many Christians try to bring up their children whereby they don't ask questions, they don't doubt. Just believe. The Bible says, you heard Pastor Mike, you heard Pastor Peter, just believe, don't ask questions. And what happens is they think that you're not allowed to have doubts, and they go to university perhaps, or they leave home and do something else. They meet other people who don't think the same as them, and they start to think, wow, it's more complicated than all of that. And that's when many children, teenagers, young adults lose their faith, because they have not been taught that doubts and questioning are part of a healthy, growing, vibrant faith. And thankfully, it's those who then bed in and start going with those questions, even though it's uncomfortable, who can come through the other side of that and continue walking. Many other children, and you probably know this as well, they give up on faith, even when they come home and they pretend to their parents they still believe it all. They lead a split life, trying to make the parents happy, trying to play along. It's not so much that doubts are bad, they are good. It's how we respond to them which is really important. Unhealthy ways, I suggest, of responding to doubts are denial. Pretending that they're not there. Repressing them, suppressing them, pushing them down is so unhealthy. They will come back to bite you. And even when they're not biting you, they are undermining your walk of faith. Another way is to wear a mask, to pretend everything's okay. And yes, I believe we can say words like praise the Lord, I trust the Lord. We can quote many verses. We can go through many rituals and not have a jolt of faith. But we end up thinking that religion is what it's all about. And we push away our doubts and our fears. Another unhealthy way is to maybe carry on coming to church, going to your small group in the week, physically present but not emotionally or spiritually, just going through the motions, maybe saying the right things, but not acknowledging the doubts within. Sometimes we might try to anaesthetize those doubts because they do rock us so much. They are so painful. We have so much we think to lose. So we will anaesthetize it by working too hard, even working for the church really hard, and ignoring it, just getting on with stuff. But the doubts don't go away, or we can use alcohol, drugs, or prescribe medication. Not that that's bad, but we can use all these things to anaesthetize the painful doubts. And sometimes we can give up on church altogether. And just, we can't ask questions like that. We can't do this doubt thing. So I'm just going to leave. What is the healthy way to look at doubts? Firstly, to acknowledge them to yourself, to myself, to bring them before God, because you know this as well as I do. God knows about them already. He's more aware of our doubts than we are. He was very well aware of Thomas's doubts. Again, he wasn't physically present, but he was present with Thomas when Thomas said, I won't believe until. God knows about your doubts better than you. Don't be ashamed of your doubts before God. I think God is saying, bring them into the light. Bring them into the open. You acknowledge your doubts, and then we can do something about them. Acknowledge them before your minister. One of your ministers, both of your ministers. Bring them into the life, and you won't be castigated, you know that already. But actually you'll be encouraged. This is really healthy. Fantastic. Yes, I have doubts too. Daily. Every minute. Alongside my faith. Bring it into the light and acknowledge it. Acknowledge it in your whole life group. Let's get away from any shame culture, whereby when we express doubts we think there's something wrong with us. Let's get rid of the other culture where we go through the motions and pretend everything is hunky-dory when we jolly well know that it's not. So the question is how we respond to our doubts. Let me draw this together. It's often said, but I think it's worth saying again, faith is a little bit like a muscle. The more that you exercise faith, the more the muscles grow. Forgive me, but I happen to believe this is true. I could be wrong. The trouble is with many of us followers of Christ is we don't exercise the faith muscle much. We don't choose to step out in faith. We don't choose to take risks for our faith, either as church or as individuals. I'm going to follow, but I want to know where the path ends. I want to know all the answers before I set out on this step of faith. Or I want to know exactly how God will provide. Or I want to know everything. That is us taking control. That is not living a life of faith. That is fulfilling those words that most Christians tend to end up living as functional atheists. We go through the motions of church, but actually we're not living by faith. In fact, sometimes the only time we exercise faith is when we have no choice, when it comes our way and we can't get away from it because of health problems, marriage problems, financial problems, emotional problems, and we just can't get away from it. The trouble is, if we have not been learning to live a life of faith before that happens, that can then come as a crushing blow, in which we feel like we might be losing our faith totally because we haven't wrestled and questioned and acknowledged and grown through our doubts on our walk of faith. The other thing to hold on to, that I hold on to anyway, is this Christou. Paul talks a lot in Romans about faith in Christ. One other way to look about that as well is Christus. Pistis, faith in Greek, Christou, is the faithfulness of Christ. However you feel, however high your faith barometer is or low, and how high your doubts are, Christ will remain faithful to you, whatever. Christ will remain with you, whatever. Christ loves you, whatever. That is fact. Our faith can go up and down, but his love and his reliability and faithfulness to us is constant. Now, Rick, the dive master, proved reliable. He took us out into the ocean. He took us down into the sea in the daylight and brought us back. He took us into the sea at night and brought us back. I thought he was dead, but he came back to life again. Jesus is always with us, and he is the one who truly died and was resurrected, that we no longer fear death. He sent his Spirit, that by his Spirit he is always with us, every step of our walk of faith, even if our doubts are really, really high. And this is true. It's just as Rick brought us back home to Cairns at the end of the diving expedition. Jesus is preparing a room for us, and he will come back in person, and he is the way there. And in the meantime, he says, I will be with you always.